2, 1. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Health Hangouts with Amanda. And we are doing these videos to spread strength, hope, and love to those of you who aren't asking for help or don't know how to ask for help, and just offering a way for people to stay tuned into ideas that we have about passing along what we're doing to strengthen ourselves, our families, our communities in the best way we can with the resources that we do have, because we are all in the same boat here together. So today I have Jake with us, and Jake has been a clinician of strength counseling services for approximately 2 years, and I've known Jake for a lot longer than that. Actually, we were educated in the same city, little old Alberta, and so yeah, so it's been great, Jake, to have you in my life for a long time, and it's been like doubly or duly great for you to work with us here. Your presence has been really important for this organization and for the clients that you serve. So what I'm going to do is just invite Jake to tell us a little bit about himself and kind of what's going on in his life.
Sure. Yeah. Just a quick little bit about myself. I met Amanda in BC, where I worked for a long time at an addiction treatment center. I grew up in Saskatchewan, where I currently am now. I'm back here completing grad school right now. And so, yeah, it's kind of an interesting point in my life, especially with just moving in January back here, and then boom, hit with all the COVID stuff. And it's been lots of changes, lots of new things, but one steady thing has been working with strength, and it's been really, really fun, and I love online. And so getting to counsel online, doing all this kind of stuff, this is my jam. I love it, and I want to continue to do it for probably most of my life, as long as I can. So it's cool to see everyone on Zoom. We've been using Zoom for like 2 years, well, probably more than that.
Well, we've been, the organization has been using, we were using Skype to begin with, and we started 7 years ago online. And so we've been using Zoom for maybe half that time. We moved over from Skype to Zoom. But yeah, we've been online for a long time, and you've been obviously with us for the last 2 years using that platform, and it's pretty incredible how well it can work, for sure.
Yeah, I've previously tried a whole bunch out, so it's cool to see that people are actually using something that works well now, which is great. But yeah, it's been a part of my life, like ever since growing up. Doing things online has been normal for me, because I grew up in a farm, and so it was kind of isolated. And so my sister told me the other day, she's like, we were made for this. We've been in quarantine for 18 years of our life, because we lived like 20 minutes from anywhere. And so and I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, it was kind of like this before. I would spend, a lot of time on the computer, and then I'd go outside and, do things by myself and play by myself. And, yeah, that was kind of my life for a lot of the years too. And so, yeah, it's interesting how, those memories and the things I learned and kind of learned how to take care of myself in those moments are actually kind of, popping up now and making more sense to me. So that's really neat. I just realized that the other day.
So sounds to me like you're in your element, and you're in a really great place with having to be online, because you're pretty used to it.
Yeah, I would say so. It's something that it's unusual for a lot of people, but like when you're forced to do it, like I was when I was young, it's you just use what you got, right? It's that flexibility to use whatever is available for you. And like at that time I had dial up, so I really was being flexible.
Oh, oh yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
know all
like
about that.
And so it was really a struggle. And so even now I'm still like, wow, like it's awesome that we can communicate like this and even have these kind of calls, and we can provide counseling, we can provide all these different things. And it's just amazing. And so I just love how far it's came over the years. And yeah, I do feel kind of comfortable in it, because it's definitely something I've used before to create connection with a lot of people around me. And keep myself sane sometimes. And
Hmm.
that's so a lot of people are kind of figuring it out too. And so yeah, I have a lot of like little weird methods that people don't even like think about too. I could tell you a couple of them. So like I
Yeah,
actually
for sure.
um, I like I'm not really like I'm kind of like a half introvert, half extrovert. And so I like having people around. I like being in public areas and that kind of thing. And so one thing I've noticed during this kind of COVID quarantine phase is I've been really missing that, just having people in my area, right? And so what I've kind of done is, I don't know if anyone knows this, but there's like lots of sites out there like Twitch, where they do streaming, right? And so you have streamers who
Okay.
stream like gaming and all that kind of stuff, but there's lots of other ones. So there's like ones that do music, and they do, you can find DJs on there, you can find people who are just chatting, people who are just studying. And so like
Hmm.
you'll have someone who's just like doing, their work, and then people are in chat talking, and then they'll take a break and we all take a break and like chat, and then they'll go back. And so like little things like that have, I think, really helped me kind of uh, I guess fill that void of just like having people around. And even if I'm not paying attention, I'm just doing schoolwork, it's just kind of nice to be able to go over there or even just look over and just be like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, there's someone or something, right? Which is, yeah, not something that, I was really doing before that much, but I kind of felt like it's been um, filling the need there. So it's been one of my secrets to staying sane during this.
Oh, I love it. And, you know, I really want to thank you for your presence here today because I haven't, I mean, I haven't seen you in a long time. Like physically, I haven't seen you in a really long time. Because now you're in Saskatchewan. But and when I do see you, a couple times a month when we do supervision together. But it's really great to connect on a personal level here, and we don't do that, right? Like that's one of the things that these that this timing of the the pandemic and us having to just be at home and not be able to engage in outside meetings or work related activities or friend activities. I'm finding that I'm able to connect on deeper levels with people that I wasn't able to before, or that we didn't make the time to do this. There's just always so much going on. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I'm super grateful for. And when I look at you and I'm like, oh, and my heart feels happy. Like that's, when you look at someone, you're like, oh, I miss that person, like
Mm-hmm.
this was really great to connect. Um there's a lot that happens in the brain when we're able to connect with a like-minded individual, one that we maybe are inspired by or motivated by or care a lot about or have a working dynamic with that works really well. So I'm really grateful for that in this moment, because it's really great to see you and be able to have like a personal conversation that we haven't been able to in a long, long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. And I think one thing that I've been working with a lot with people is this kind of idea of not playing the victim role, as in like, yeah, we're all, kind of quarantined and we're kind
Mm-hmm.
of alone, a little bit isolated and that kind of thing. But like, I think we all kind of we have to realize our responsibility to reach out and, make these kind of connections again. And like, it's not just going to fall in our laps all the time. And, and once we realize that and we grasp that, then things like this happen, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a part of you where you realize like, okay, there's a responsibility here, to connect and could really help. And like once we grasp that, then these kind of conversations or videos or anything like that, then they happen, right? And so it's been a big kind of thing for me in making the best of this, is realizing is I have a responsibility to make connections here, and things aren't just gonna happen on their own. And I've had people say like, oh, no one's calling me, no one's calling me. I'm like, does that matter? No, do you want to call people? Do you want to talk to people? And if the answer is yes, then like boom, like let's work with that, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think the more we're kind of put in this kind of spot, then those kind of things inside of us, they start saying like, hey, like I do want to talk to people, I do want to connect, and it is really important to me. And so like I think a big thing here is just like actually listening to that. And like when you asked me if I wanted to do the video, and it was like I did feel that I wanted. I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds fun.
Mhm.
And like just to not only be with you for a little bit, but yeah, like get to see if anyone has any comments or questions too. Like that, I love that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's awesome. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for donating your time to do this with me for anybody who is watching. So Jake, I was thinking we could talk about today just what life has been like for you as a result of not only the pandemic, but even before that. Like you had a move that happened not too long ago. You entered into grad school, and that alone, like that's a lot to do before any of this, any of the stress that came with this. Um, and so I'm interested to hear about like, yeah, what life's been like, and then I want to transition that into talking a bit about the work that we do, and that, I mean, like you and I, with our separate clients, and what we're seeing they're faced with in the changes here. But if we could start with you, that'd be wonderful.
Sure. Yeah. I think this year probably has been the most change in probably the last like 6, 7 years of my life. And so, getting into grad school and moving within like 2 weeks to halfway across the country was definitely a jolt in the system, but like a good jolt for me. It was definitely very stressful, but the timing kind of lined up just like perfectly, as in I kind of already had gotten settled here and already started grad school, and um, kind of got a good footing before the whole COVID thing. So I was extremely lucky there to kind of have all that stuff kind of done. But like at the same time, re-entering school and getting used to that kind of the academia um, stuff again has been a challenge for sure, and so it's been a lot of hours of just like kind of learning and getting back into like writing major papers and that kind of thing, which has been um, uh, good but like hard, right? And so it's really, and what the biggest thing here too is I do it all online, and so I have to have my own schedules for everything. And so I realized how much I relied, and I think a lot of people are realizing how much we relied on our job or our,
Mhm.
outside forces to dictate our schedules, right? And when we're forced with, kind of that all taken away, just how, mine was kind of just all taken away and changed, we really get to see like, oh, how good are we at keeping our own schedules and, working on time and being like, hey, I'm going to work for an hour and then actually do it. Like,
Mhm.
it's hard. And
It's
I do.
tough. Oh, I know. I can be my own worst enemy. I'm like, oh, I've said in the last video, I said, I'm waking up at 11 o'clock in the morning these days. And I'm like, oh, now my morning is gone for all these things that I wanted to do. And I'm going to bed at 2 in the morning. And it's like, I have to take some more responsibility for my life. Otherwise, I just like get kind of like lazy. And it's hard when you're like, okay, in the schedule. And then my brain kind of goes, oh, that can wait. And
Mhm.
when I was doing my master's, that's how it felt. It's like, oh, I did block off 4 hours to do this article or whatever it is, and oh, but I'm too tired. That can wait. And then I totally get that piece from my perspective.
Yeah, and I'm sure people can relate, especially if you're working from home right now. It can be really difficult. Um, but it kind of worked out again here that I had to do like a self study in one of my first classes. And so I had to like actually do research basically on myself. And what
Hmm.
I kind of, just to, I won't go deep into it and bore you guys, but
Oh, you
um,
share whatever you want, Jake. It's important. You're
um,
important.
but basically what I was kind of researching in myself here was um, what was the obstacles of me actually sitting down and using that work time that I'd set aside properly for work, and had that concentration throughout that time, right? And so my kind of hypothesis was around that it was mindfulness that was the problem. And so I actually used one of our other colleagues here at Strength, Tyler, who does
Hmm.
breath work or breathology, and I got him to teach me some of that stuff, and I actually integrated that into my study. And so what I was doing was every time before I would start a project or my work time, I would do the breathing exercise and practice mindfulness. And I was
Hmm.
measuring my level of mindfulness throughout the day, every day. And so it got a little bit tedious at the end just because it's a lot to kind of do. But I did find, and like through my results and that kind of thing, like when I was doing the breathing right before I was going into whatever the work was, I was able to have more concentration for longer, and I felt kind of that my overall mindfulness just in the day, throughout the day was better. And so we were measuring like things like um, uh, what's a good one to talk about? The mindfulness scale measures little tiny things. Like, are you driving places and are you like super aware of where you're going? When you're walking around, are you like just like lost in your thought? Are you like grounded and you know where you are and that kind of thing? And like it
Hmm.
was just mind blowing how much how mindful I wasn't. And so you don't really notice those things until you kind of start tracking them. But yeah,
Hmm.
and so like that's one thing I would definitely recommend for anyone who struggles with that kind of thing. I've kept doing it since the study, and I found just actually taking like 1 to 2 minutes at least to do some kind of breathing in exercise or sensing in exercise. Um, I found that I just wasn't as kind of impulsive to like pull up Facebook or just do something else. And so you know I would definitely recommend that for anybody who's struggling with that. But yeah, also just scheduling. I really had to actually use some tools to help me with scheduling. So like Google Calendar has really like changed my life because it just like reminds
Hmm.
me about everything. I love it. And Todoist.com. They have an app as well that's really nice for just like goals and that sort of thing. So those have been huge in kind of me taking charge of my schedule and really taking ownership and responsibility of that because no one's checking, like no one's there's no really boss or anything with grad school.
Hmm.
It's totally up to me. And so it's been a struggle for sure, but little by little those things they kind of get better. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's been a lot of changes there. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate, Jake, that you mentioned Tyler. Um, he's been coming up a lot more lately in conversation because the techniques that he's teaching are really grounding, right? And for those of you who are watching this video, I did an interview with Tyler last week, or that it was posted last week. So you can go back into the videos of these health hangouts, and you can watch the video with Tyler. In that particular video, he actually practiced a technique, or I practiced a technique with him
Mm.
in terms of just being really present in my breath. And it was helpful. It was really helpful. So that's great to hear that you have also worked with Tyler. And I've heard nothing but wonderful things about the outcome of what he's doing. And so we really appreciate Tyler's presence around here
Hmm.
in this company. So that's wonderful. And these other little things like these apps that you can use to help you stay on track, I think they're super valuable. Like if I honestly look at my calendar and I'm like, if I didn't have a calendar, I would not remember anything. And I appreciate it so much. But the key is like sometimes with when I'm well in myself and when I'm working with some of my clients, I say, okay, like let's get a calendar and let's get organized and to help achieve the goals that they're looking for, or the goals I'm looking to achieve. And I'll get a reminder and I'll just ignore, I'll be like, oh, later. And then I forget that it happened. And then I'm like, oh, and I'm consistently like going back, oh, how did I forget to do that thing? Because in that moment I was doing something else. And so I've gotten to a place now to help me stay on track when something comes up, whether it's a reminder on my phone that I'm about to ignore, or a text message that, like, honestly, once I read a text message, if I don't respond in that moment, I won't remember to respond. So I've gotten this place of like improving my communication with people by responding right away. But if I respond right away and I don't have an answer, then I have to say, I'll have to get back to you. But I have to remind myself to get back to that person. So I'll actually take screenshots of whatever is showing up on my phone, and then I email it to myself. So when I
Nice.
get through my emails, there's this screenshot, and then I read it and I'm like, oh yeah, I have to do that thing and get back to that person, or whatever it is. Or, oh, there's that reminder that I ignored that I've totally forgotten about. Glad it's in my inbox. So that's a technique that I use to try and stay on track, because if I can store it somewhere where I have to look at it, because the emails I do look at daily, and I work on getting back to everybody as quickly as I possibly can, which is tough these days with the amount of emails we're getting. But yeah, so I appreciate that, like, even the nature of this conversation about schedules and how when we're working at home, we're kind of free reign. Like, we might have, like, even in this company, Jake, like, you organize your own schedule. I don't ever like check in with you about, oh, like, hey, like, are you seeing this person and this person on Tuesday? Like, we don't do that. You do your thing, and you do that very well. But it takes, I think, for the folks out there who aren't used to doing this and aren't used to having to be self-directive in the work that they're doing, it takes a transition. It takes a lot of practice too. And not to mention, when we're at home all the time, we look at the mental health side effects of that. And I don't, maybe we'll talk about what your clients are experiencing, but my clients are experiencing this, like, it's just less interest. Like I don't care anymore. I don't care about putting the dishes away. I don't care about taking care of the things that I normally would have to take care of. And sometimes it's like, I can't even handle my kids, and I don't care. Like, I don't know how to handle them, and they're all around all the time. And so we have this aspect of organization that can be an art for people to perfect for themselves. But then we have all the consequences to the mental health when we're confined at home. And right. And so we're trying to mitigate both of those things and still trying to work at home. And it's really, really tough for people right now. For some people, like what you're saying, like, you're used to this, you've had a lot of years of practice to get to this point. And that's wonderful. But there are people out there who are really struggling with trying to find that balance, not only with the organization piece, but also with the family piece. Or if they're a single parent, trying to access supports. Like, families can only, like, when you go grocery shopping, you only take one member of the family in the grocery store at a time. You can't take your kids. So it's like, how do I find childcare when I'm a single parent and I need to go grocery shopping? What do I do? And I don't have the money to pay someone to come and watch the kids, or can anyone come into my house and watch the kids? Or, can the kids sit in the car? Like, there's so many reasons why that's hard for families. And I'm not even talking just single parents. Sometimes there may be two parents, and one's working and the other one has to go to the grocery store, and the one working can't watch the children, or whatever. And I mean, it's not just hard for, of course, people who have children. I think it's hard all around. So I appreciate the organization conversation here, and that's really valuable. But then there's also this mental health aspect. And so I wonder what your thoughts are about connecting the two. And, like, you talked about apps and things like that, but how do we mitigate the challenge of the mental health aspect of what's happening and getting organized?
Well, to kind of connect it a little bit with mental health, I think the thing about the organization and the apps and all that kind of thing, there's a very practical side of it, but I think there is a more like of a mental side too, right? And so it connects us with, I would call it our ritualistic nature. We all have rituals, and The thing is, I don't think many people realize just how much we depend on these rituals to kind of keep us mentally going and safe and that kind of thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think we approach things very pragmatically, um, and we don't put enough, I guess we don't put enough effort into looking at how do we create new rituals and be flexible in
Mm-hmm.
that so that we can keep our mental health, up or like higher, right? And so this thing, and I've worked with a lot of clients around it because everybody's rituals have changed from this situation with COVID, right? And that's just a fact. And so what's kind of great is that we kind of get to work on this kind of part, and like the self exploration that technically is available right now for people is like like this is almost like a once in a lifetime opportunity to really look at like, hey, what do I need socially? What do I need, for time for myself? What do I need, in so many different areas? And how can I be flexible in getting that to make myself feel like, hey, my life still has purpose, and you know, and that like this is worthy, right? And just because we're in quarantine or we can't do all these things, it forces us to see like, hey, is all that from the outside, or is some of this from the inside? And so it really kind of gets us to like do some inner work, I would say, right? And so when we're doing our inner work is when we start looking at some of these rituals that we have and what we need to make ourselves kind of be fulfilled throughout the day, you know like even like you can think about it in so many different areas, like dishes, right? So like, you know if you're struggling to do your dishes and you're not thinking it's worth it, then that's a perfect place to examine, why do we do dishes, right? Why do I need to do dishes? What does it feel like when I do dishes? And when things are clean or when things are dirty, and just like exploring that, right? And I think sometimes we don't have this kind of learning kind of attitude in these situations. We can kind of just sit in the, well, this sucks,
Yeah.
right? And so we really have a choice in a lot of these situations, and like we can look at COVID as horrible and that we're stuck and we don't have anything to do, or we can really see this as a chance to get to know ourselves better and see what habits, like, hey, like maybe these are good habits, maybe these are bad habits, and like, can I change that, right? And so I think it really depends on the way you look at this situation. And I've seen a lot of people change their mindset, and it's totally like changed the way they deal with anything from their family to their dishes. Um, it all has to do with inside, right? Because there's
Mm-hmm.
so much out of control right now. Like everything is like out of our control. And so when we really look at it, we really have to like kind of boil it down to basics. It's like, what can I do in this moment? And what's gonna connect me with the true self inside of me? And how's that gonna feel, right? And so once we kind of start looking at life or start looking at our jobs or anything through that lens, it changes. And so we can make like a horrible situation into something like, hey, this is actually really beneficial for me right now. And that's and the people that I've worked with, and even when I've done it for myself, that's usually the answer to most of these questions, right? As in, what is this situation teaching me? What can I learn from this? And and how am I going to use this in the future, right? Does that make sense,
Mm-hmm.
Amanda?
Totally. I'm wondering, Jake, if you could use a specific example from your own life of how you have achieved that.
Hmm, good question. Well, I guess that if just off the top of my head, um,
Mm-hmm.
I think I guess I could talk about a couple different things, but this actually relates to um, my mindset when I first started grad school. Was, I was really, I didn't want to do grad school online, and I didn't want to do it from Saskatchewan. And guess what
Mhm.
I'm doing right now, right?
Grad school online in
In
Saskatchewan.
Yep, that was like those were my only two things. Those were
Yeah.
like, I would go anywhere. I would go to a different country, didn't care. Those are the only two, hang-ups I had. And and I stuck with that. And it actually kind of basically it delayed my getting into grad school until I kind of gave up. I
Mhm.
stopped trying to like control things and actually just looked at like what's my need, right? What do I actually need here instead of like what do I want, right?
Mhm.
And so I was kind of able to, coax myself out of it and like just see like, okay, so my need is I need to go to grad school and it needs to be affordable and doable for me, right?
Mhm.
And so I need to be flexible enough to accept what's gonna be that answer for me. And in this case, this was the answer. And so that happened when I went to college as well, right? I did a psychology degree, and I needed a job after, and so me going into addictions counseling program, I didn't want to. I actually didn't want to, but I knew that I would get a job through that, and it would lead me in a
Mhm.
direction. And so, and it was right, right? And so those are kind of two little examples of there's like that what we want and what we need. And like, you know, the more I've learned to kind of differentiate the two and be flexible in those times, then my gut or my intuition will then pop up and be like, yeah, like this isn't what you want, but like this is what you need, and it's going to be okay, right? And and so like anytime you know I'm struggling with accepting what's going on right now or that kind of thing, I'm I usually am checking like, okay, so like what do you actually need in this situation, right? And I think it really can apply to most problems we see, especially with people, in families, or we're all stuck together,
Mhm.
and we're all forced to kind of be in each other's space. And so like it really, I think a lot of working through our problems right now is looking at, okay, here's what do you want, but what do you actually need right now? And that's okay if you do need some things, and we need to ask for help, and we need to be communicative about that. And so like I got sick in probably like the third week of the kind of quarantine lockdown, and I was like scared for sure. Like I was,
Mhm.
I didn't have a lot of symptoms that were COVID related, but like it was still really affecting me and my ability to do school, and it wasn't going away. And so um, I ended up having to call, and then they were asking me to get tested, and I didn't want to do it because I was scared,
Mhm.
right?
Sure.
And but at the same time, I was like, you probably need to get tested, right? I didn't want to get tested, but I probably needed to get tested, and I did it, and it was actually like super not a big deal. Um, and I left there feeling really grateful for just like them putting their life on the line to be there testing. And it was actually kind of a real humbling experience to go in and just see all these people working really hard, and putting themselves in danger. And so I was and then I and so through that, then it came back negative and everything. But like, just another example of like, yeah, I guess I needed to do that, and I needed to phone 811 and talk to them, even though
Mhm.
I didn't want to. But like, the more I struggle with, that kind of thing, that's when I struggle against reality. That's that's when I know that I need to like just calm down and look at like, what do I actually need in this moment? What's going to be beneficial for me? And usually things start working out It's when I'm trying to control and make things happen the way I want it to happen.
Mhm.
And that's usually when I struggle. And so the more I can step back from that kind of thing and, not fight reality on reality's terms, or and live life on life's terms. I love that one. That's when, I have more peace, and I can accept the things that, hey, I don't like this, but like, hey, it's happening, and that's okay, right?
Mhm.
Sorry to rant.
No, I love it. I love it. So there's a couple things that are coming up. One is that there's this it's like this idea of, oh, maybe I should get tested, or maybe I should phone 811, or which is, I imagine, HealthLink in Saskatchewan,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and there's almost like, this might not be the right way to say this, but it feels like there's a stigma around like this, like getting tested, and oh, if you're sick, and it's this invisible virus, and like, we look sideways at everybody, and we walk far away from everybody, and we need to do that. We need to walk away from everybody. And I
Hmm.
understand that, but it's like it's really important, I think, to share here that, or in general, that there doesn't have to be any shame around this, because we're all human beings who are all susceptible to this in one way or another, not to mention the strain changes. And now, like, I don't know if my facts are right or not, but at one point I heard there was 4 different strains, and it mutates, and it's, you know so if
Yeah.
if we have to get tested, it's to save our own lives, and to help save lives of those around us. So it's interesting to me how easy we can be separated from society. Like, oh, you have AIDS, so that makes you, less valuable. Or, oh, you have COVID, so that makes you, I'm going to stay away from you. And like, yeah, I get we need to protect ourselves, but the judgments that come from the ailments that we have, and we've been talking for centuries about equality, and these fights for rights, of various kinds, in various minorities. And I won't even pick one, because there's so many of them, and I've done my best to advocate, for various minority types that I can. So here's another one. Like, after everything that's going on in the world, and
Right.
how much conflict this is causing for people, we have members of society who are not only like pointing fingers and saying, oh, well, you're defective in some way, and placing judgment on that. But then we also have, like you've just mentioned, and I'll spotlight you here for a minute, like you having to get tested, and what came up for you. I don't want to do that. So I'm just curious if you can share with me, like, why you didn't want to do that, what that fear was about for you.
Mm. And I'm still kind of exploring it as well, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think there is some fear of getting tested, as in just like, oh, you're going to a place where there might be people more sick, right?
Yeah.
So there's that's definitely like something for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think there is like a stigma, and for me, like I live, with my mom who is high risk as well, and that was a big thing. Was like, I need to get tested because I need to make sure that, if I do have something, then like, hey, like let's we need to separate, because I definitely wouldn't want to, that would be the worst if somehow I given that to
Mm-hmm.
her, right? And so that was a huge factor of why I did go, for sure. But you're right, like there still is the stigma, right? We don't want to be the
Mm-hmm.
one. We don't want to be the 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 one who has it, right? And first of all, we're scared, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
everybody is just scared to get it, right? Because we don't know how we're going to react. We don't know if we're going to be one of the ones that are, oh, it's just kind of like a, headache, or we're going to be on ventilators, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
the amount of unknown there is just so wide that the brain, I think the mind, it just kind of goes to all those conclusions, and the disasterization is really easy to get into. And so I think the the reality is that any of us could get it, right? And I think we want to stay away from that reality, right? We don't want to accept that. we want to think, okay, it's only the people that are this, or the only people that are this, or if I do this, then I won't get it, and that kind of thing. And I think that, there's an anxiety there, right? That's underlying all of that, right? And so when you're, and so I told this to someone too. I was like, if you think you're good and you're not worrying about it, just get sick during this timing right now, and then you'll see if you're actually worried.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's true. Once you actually get
Changes
sick,
everything.
you start thinking like, wow, this is real, and like, hey, I might actually have this, right?
Even a little headache or like anything, and it's very fear invoking. Like I know myself, I got sick in the last, well, honestly, this winter I was sick 3 times over the course of 6 weeks, and it lasted a long time. Like all 3 times lasted a long time, and I was like, wow, like what's going on here? But the third time I got sick, that was really scary, because I was like, holy, like people are now dying and there's not enough ventilators and things like that. So I actually was afraid for my own life, right? And which I know is happening out there. And I guess the hard part, like as a clinician, I say this, but as a human being to other human beings watching this, and to you, Jake, like I think human beings can be really, we have a choice to be really collective or really disconnected. And if we're disconnected and we're placing judgments upon others who are in a minority, which I'm actually suggesting here, that the COVID cases, although it's becoming more and more widespread, this is a world problem. There are a ton of people in the world who don't have this virus, or who've recovered from the virus. But for those who currently have the virus, or those who are dying from the virus, it's like they're a minority and they're being judged by a lot of folks. That it's just like come on, guys, like we have a choice to be collective here and protect yourselves for sure. However, it's like this is just another minority problem. And so I say this in a kind of there's only so much I can do, but like a pleading way, like open our eyes and like let's see what we can be doing to support. And now that's not to take away from the fact that there is tons of support that's being offered by tons of agencies, and like look at what the government is trying to do, and I appreciate all of that wholeheartedly. But there are a lot of folks who are struggling, and there are a lot of people who aren't caring much about that, which I'm struggling with myself, right? And again, we can only do so much, but if we can pass this message on to say, like, this doesn't have to be a minority problem, like, but I could go on like this forever. How I like I myself, I came out as gay like long ago, 7 years ago or something like that, and that was a really, really interesting transition into a minority group, and so I really am advocating for, like, come on, like, let's work together, because this is a world issue, but so is I don't want to say issue, but so is being part of the LGBTQ movement, right? That's a world thing. Being of a different race is a world thing. Being a different gender, world thing. Like, you name it, all these minority groups, a world thing. So as far as I see it, we don't have to add to the world things and create a minority group here, but we are doing that. And I'm just like, I'm not surprised, but I'm just fascinated to see how it unfolds. But I also am heartwarmed by seeing the support that is coming from it. So even you we're in a position of like, oh, I don't want to get tested, like what if? And there's a lot around that. It's heavy, right? For various reasons you've shared already. But that's really what I'm kind of gleaning from what you're saying, is like people are scared. Let's help them, let's help them best way we can.
I think the biggest thing and the biggest issue is having kind of that mind of separation, right? As in, it's their problem, it's not me, it's theirs, it's theirs, it's theirs. And like, the minute that we change that in ourselves and we're like, oh, this is my problem too, and it does affect me, and I could easily just be in their position. It's like that, it's just that open that door to empathy, right? And the more we
Mhm.
separate ourselves, like this could never happen to me, or it's, I'm, young, or I'm, I sanitize everything. It's never going to happen to me. Then you create
Mhm.
this separation, right? And the biggest thing, there is, when we have that separation, we lose kind of that warmth, right? And so like I
Mhm.
really pay attention to how I am, especially when I'm going out in public, that kind of thing. I keep the distance, that for sure. That's for sure. However, it doesn't mean we don't smile at each other and can say hi, or, still be nice and warm to each other. And because that's where I find that a lot of, you know, it's when we really get lost, is when, not only are we physically separated, but, we emotionally separate from people as well. And
Mhm.
that can be just as dangerous and lead us into, this kind of fear, this fear of everybody and everything. And that can be quite toxic just to, our minds and how we deal with everything, right? And so, yeah, we need to keep these distances and that kind of thing. But I think in this timing, we really still need to be able to connect with that warmth that we have inside, and that love, and that we can see that people are suffering, and people are scared, and everyone's scared, and
Mhm.
we're all the same, and we're all one, right? It's not this separate, and you're the COVID, and you're this race, or you're this, that kind of thing. And so it's honestly a good opportunity for us to see those when our blinders, when they come up like that. If we're like avoiding, and like we don't want to, we're so scared to even like look at someone in the grocery store, then like that's something we have to reflect on, I think, and see like, hey, like, am I letting my fear drive everything, or my life right now, or am I letting, my empathy and my compassion and, that kind of part of me drive my life right now? And I
Mhm.
think we have a choice, right? And so these conversations are really good to have, because it, it kind of can bring up that realization of like, oh yeah, I am letting my fear kind of just drive everything, and that's where the separation lives, and that's where
Yeah.
the bullying, or the all that kind of lives, right? And so we have to not go to that place, I feel, and it's really, really important to be self-aware around that.
Mhm. So, Jake, would you have any advice for anybody who is out there and say they are among a minority group, for example, any minority group, or just like anybody struggling who doesn't know how to access supports around them, or for example, they've tried to access their friends or their family and they're not finding support there and they're feeling really alone in this world, because we can say here, yeah, we need to reconnect to love and sharing and like helping others while also protecting ourselves and helping ourselves. But there are a ton of people out there who don't have the support. um, so we're speaking to two different groups of people. There's like the people who we say, yeah, you guys have the potential to be supporting others and reaching out, and then we have this group of people who don't have access to that. And I certainly have my thoughts about what those people can be doing if they don't know who to reach out to, but I wonder for you what your thoughts are about that.
Mm. Yeah, it's a good question, and I think the biggest thing here is for us to reflect on, if we're having trouble with that, is it because of our own thinking that is
Mm-hmm.
stopping us, or is it a real like systematic problem, right? And so what I've kind of seen, and I've heard in the last little bit of, is, a lot of people are struggling because the people that they want to be their supports aren't their supports right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we get stuck in that sometimes. And so sometimes we're not flexible in who we're using for our supports, and who is actually going to be, who has the capacity to support us, right? And so we have to look at that internally and say, hey, am I actually being flexible enough to get my needs met right now, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
right? or am I stuck on trying to, you know, get something from someone who might not be capable? And like that's just a reality right now of the people around us. Some are able to support others around us, others are not doing good. And like that's
Hmm.
okay, right? And sometimes we have to lower our expectations of, you know, who can support us. And once we do that, then sometimes it opens our eyes to see like, hey, oh, I have, you know, these people over here that are trying, or I know that
Yeah.
there's these, you know, helplines and these things, and you know I can call, you know, things like 811, or you know I can, you know, there's free counseling sessions online and that kind of thing. There are other options, but like we really, I think the biggest thing is reflecting on like what's our part in that, right? And what can we,
Hmm.
how do we become more flexible, and ask for help in many other ways. A lot of times we're, you know, whether we know it or not, we're scared of rejection. And the biggest thing here is, you know, and I work a lot with clients around this, is like rejection, we have this shame built around it, and like this idea that like it's kind of like this, there's a fear around it. And I try to move people into this kind of thinking of like rejection is just information, right? It's just information telling me, hey, this person not available, isn't going to be good for that. And thanks, I'm glad I know that now. That's great,
Hmm.
and now I can move on and find someone else
Hmm.
who can support me and, you know, isn't going to do that, right? And so I find that like people who have that kind of attitude are usually resilient enough to find what they need, right? And so those are kind of two things I think are kind of foundational um, for our thinking when we're trying to look for specific supports out there. And so, you know, anybody who, you know, is looking for something and they don't know what to do, then like phone some of these agencies, like medical health agencies, and ask them for, you know, more resources, right? That's
Hmm.
okay. You can do
Yeah.
that. And if they say no, great, phone someone else.
Yeah.
Right? And so like it's just this, we can't give up on ourselves in finding what we need, I think.
Hmm. Love it. Thanks, Jake. Something you said in a group that we were in together not long ago is you said to somebody, "What's your step one?" And I thought that was really powerful. Now, before I ask this question, or we venture into an answer, I want to preface by saying, like, you know, we do support the 12 steps and all the value or benefit that comes from that program. But it's not the only recovery program that we endorse. Like, we're very eclectic in our approach. But when I say step one, obviously I'm talking about the 12 steps, but we can extrapolate this idea of step one across the board, from addiction to mental health, to anything that we're powerless in
Mm.
as human beings, like being in the human condition. So so I just wanted to say that piece. um, but yeah, Jake, you mentioned to this person, you know, this person who was struggling, and you said, like, what's your step one? And you know, it's important that we don't talk about the group itself, but why did you ask that question, and what's the value of step one for you, and how can we pass the premise of that along without tying people into the 12 steps necessarily?
Hmm. Yeah, typically step one is, you know, the base for a lot of change, and especially with addictions and realizing, hey, I'm powerless over my use of, you know, alcohol or drugs. And
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like it applies to a lot of, you know, other things in life, right? And and it's kind of like a human condition, I think. Um, and so when, you know, we kind of are, we keep having, you know, negative consequences for something, and yet we're still digging, still trying to fix it, and see like, hey, like I just got to do this differently, or you know, there's this.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we really have to just like, back ourselves up into this real like humble place and kind of a learning attitude. And in that moment we like, what am I powerless over in this part? What do I need help with is the biggest thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's our thinking, that our emotions that keep making us go on this path. But at some point, we have to be able to like kind of stop the train that's been like chugging along, and we're trying to like stop it, like just with our, our bare hands, but it's not working. And get to this point in our lives where like, wow, I'm actually powerless over this, behavior or, action or something that's going on. And I can't afford to, just use my own thinking or my own, will to change it. And I have to actually ask for help and actually, listen to what other people are telling me. And sometimes this can be the, only method to like stop that train, right? And it can be really, really powerful when especially we're at that point where we really need change. And our body's telling us we need change, our mind, our spirit, it's like, we need to change, we need to change. And we keep trying to change with all these different methods, but there's something really, really powerful about being like, I'm powerless over this, and that's okay. And I need help with that. And it doesn't make me less of a human. In fact, it makes me more human. And that's okay too, right? And so it's really hard for people to get to that place. But if we can, like, I just see that as like a catalyst for change. And when I work with clients and they're at that spot, like, I get really excited because that's when it's like, okay, I'm going to stop doing this and I'll do, something different. And that's where the change happens, right? But sometimes we need to get to that place, right? And it's really, really hard, and it can be really, really difficult sometimes. But yeah, if you're struggling to change something, that sometimes getting to that spot and really kind of admitting that, or coming to terms with that, can really be a huge, huge, huge turning point in people's lives. And I think it's just something that I try to use, and I bring it into sessions with clients as well. So I think it's just really beneficial. It doesn't have to just apply to drugs or alcohol. It can apply to so many different things, and there's really no shame around it. It's just part of the human condition, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks for that. Recognizing that we can't do it all. And that's been a lesson for me over time, absolutely, where, I'm like, oh, I can be Superwoman and I can do all these things. And man, I've tried. And there have been a number of times throughout my life where I've had to, where, I call it like the universe, but where the universe guides me in this way where it's like, well, you actually can't do this because you've backed yourself into a corner or whatever. And I've had to quit jobs and various things I've had to let go, and facing that as like a failure, which isn't something I believe in. That it's not a failure to say I can't do this. It's because I don't, that's a word that I don't really subscribe to, but it's more harmful to say, oh yeah, even though everything is falling around me, I'm still going to do this, even though everything points to you can't do this. You can't be well in these decisions. I don't care what it is, whether it's alcohol or addiction of any kind, or having a job that you hate, that you're not treated well in, or whatever. And sometimes being able to say, you know what, like, my self-respect is now above what I've been doing here. And I'm going to choose that now. But in order to choose that, I have to actually experience the loss and let go of what's happening, and face this idea of failure. But we had, like, just like what you said earlier, it's like how you look at the situation. It's your viewpoint that can change everything. And so it doesn't have to be seen as a failure. It's actually quite a success to say, you know what, this is not a direction that is healthy for me. This is, and I can't go in this direction if I continue to go in this direction? Whether that's relationships that aren't working, or like I said, jobs that aren't working, or dynamics in the world that aren't working, where you're living isn't working. I encourage everyone who was watching this to take a look at what's not working in your life and see how we can view that differently in terms of what we can do about it. Because this idea of powerlessness opens up an array of other things that we're going to learn about ourselves. And getting into and Jake, you said this, the humility piece, being able to let our ego go and say, you know what, like, I can't do this, and I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop trying. Now, I don't want the viewers out here to hear that I'm saying, oh, don't work hard and don't try and just give up. I'm not saying that. Like, I think that we have to work hard in this life for our keep. We have to work really, really hard. And I think it's really important to work hard in relationships and work hard to find solutions and make things work. But there comes a point where there's a line that we cross where it becomes really destructive to our lives and our health and those around us. Like addiction, for example, or a relationship that falls into, domestic violence. And we know the cycle of violence, that it escalates if nothing is done about it. And then we find ourselves caught in this cycle of escalating violence. So it's really like understanding where that line is for you and recognizing that you don't have to do it all yourself. Mm-hmm. There are other ways. And just reaching out and asking for help there, is really important. There's, like Jake was saying, like there's lots of agencies out there, especially now, are offering digital support. And I love being one of the agencies that are offering digital support, but I love so much that we're seeing so many more show up, because there are so many people who need support. And so, like, I don't care who you contact, but call for help, and you can certainly do that with us, or you can do it with, whoever you need to do that with. And if you find that it's a fit, congratulations, like, run with it. And if you find that it's not, there's another agency that's around, or there's another friend that you can call, or there's another somebody who, there's lots of available resources online. And so, yeah, that's my piece around the step one of the powerlessness piece, and tapping into humility. Because honestly, had I kept going in, like, in my ego and addictive issues that I had in the past, if I kept going, like, I was dying. I was not well, and I couldn't really see how unwell I was at the time. But had I kept going, I never would have actually been privileged to these other doors that opened as a result of me saying, I can't do this anymore. I need to stop. And with stopping, all my energies that were being projected into my unwellness, whatever that was at whatever time, now we're just here. And there was like this power around me to be able to take this energy and give it elsewhere for, of course, my own benefit, but also, I mean, obviously we're in the helping field, if you want to call it that, but giving it away. And there's a reciprocity that happens with that, because when I talk to our clients about staying well in health, it helps me to stay well in health.
Me too. Because
of integrity and being able to show that you're doing what you're preaching, like you are living that way. Mm-hmm. And that's why we do our own personal work here too, right? We're not just like the counselors who are going to tell you what to do and we're going to, tell you what the right answers are. No, like we're mm-hmm. human beings who are in a very similar position. Honestly, we might have different training or have gone to school for a different period of time or whatever. Like, I can never be an accountant. Believe me, I've tried to do my own accounting. We'll never be good at that. In fact, I failed math. Like, I'm just like not that. But you too? You too? Yeah. So, but I can be someone who can share my experience and take education and training and that life experience and combine it into a nice bow and hand it to someone and say, here, maybe this will be supportive for you. And that's the reason why we're doing this, in addition to us staying well,
Hmm.
right? Like, I don't know what this is like for you, Jake, but I'm fired up. You can see, right? And did I wake up this morning fired up? No, I absolutely didn't. I'm dealing with, I'm trying not to swear in this podcast, but I'm dealing with a bunch of things in my personal life right now that are tough. That is the best way to say that. And so I woke up this morning in a tough place. And actually, I've woken up every morning in the last 10 days in a super tough place. But doing things like this, connecting, finding what's valuable, and tapping into things we are passionate about creates what we see here right now, what I feel right now. So I don't know what this is like for you, Jake, but that's what's happening for me.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely feel that as well. And like, that's kind of the, brilliant part about being in this kind of industry, and being a counselor is having, the privilege to be a part of conversations like this, and like people's
Mm-hmm.
change process, and
Mm-hmm.
like seeing grow. And like sometimes, it's really hard too, right? And like there's a lot of like really, really difficult situations out there, and it can pile up sometimes. But like at the end of the day, like for me, just personally, just being even a tiny part in someone's change process or growth, it's so worth it. And I really, and like even in these conversations and in our groups that we do as counselors, where we have our own kind of counseling, you know
Mm-hmm.
just little moments that I get from that, like it's so amazing, where like I can't describe where how awesome it is to be able to not only do a job, but like be able to help others grow and help grow myself. And like I feel
Mm-hmm.
so privileged to be a part of that. And just that feeling after, there's a joy, right? Even when someone is like really getting into like deep emotions, or like something gets
Mm-hmm.
triggered in me, like I see that differently now. Before we see emotions and conflict as like bad and get away. But like now I see that as a place for change and growth. And it just changed my whole view um, on everything. And now instead of looking at all these tough things, we can really change that and see them as learning opportunities and growth opportunities. And yeah, I'm just going through this process with you today, just really brings out a lot of gratitude, for you, and setting this up, and for just the container that you create for allowing this kind of conversation to happen. So I just want to say thank you.
Oh, well, I greatly appreciate your presence here today, and also in my life and in this company. We've really come together over the last few years. We've developed a really, I mean, I'm biased when I say this, but I think together we've developed a really excellent team. And I don't mean excellence in the sense of like business. I mean excellence in the sense of like humanness
Mm.
and connection. And of course, we combine that with our education and training and everything, and it just comes together really beautifully. So, and like Jake, you were saying, like we get together and we do our own work. And we just did that recently, and it was incredible, when we can get really honest with each other, and talk about our own personal issues, and how important it is to be facing that, um, because we're asking our clients to do that all the time.
Mhm.
What we realize is that when the issues arise and we don't face them, they don't go away. They somehow
Yep.
follow us like a shadow, whether that's trauma or conflict with another human, or life imbalance issues. I mean, you name it. Like, we have to face these things, and so we also, not only, I want to say like it's digital, but I want to say like we kind of walk hand in hand together to help each other face our own issues, but we also stand in opposition to crap, that we come up against. And
Mhm.
by that I mean, like, if someone is not really willing, I'm talking on the team, but our clients also, if people are not willing to face it, like, we stand up in opposition to the ego that says, oh no, like I got this figured out, or whatever,
Hmm.
whatever it is. So yeah. So anyway, so I think, yeah, I have a lot of gratitude here for the time you spent today, and just for being on this team, for sure. Now, I'm getting the sense that this could be a good place to close.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, in a roundabout way, could you give any guidance or advice to those who are watching about how to center themselves in the, with the resources they have to them based on this conversation today,
Center themselves.
or how they can
Maybe.
help themselves
Mm.
if they're really struggling, just in a summative kind of way, for anybody maybe who didn't watch the whole video.
Well, if you got to this point, I'm assuming you probably watched most of it. But some people do jump to the behind like
Sometimes, because
conclusion, right?
that's the theme, is at the end I'm saying, like, what can you offer to people that they can do to improve
Mhm.
their lives and their experience, so that it is possible people jump to the end.
Sure. Yeah, just as a quick summary, obviously paying attention to your scheduling is going to be big. Paying attention to the rituals around scheduling and rituals
Mm-hmm.
around the good things in our life and the things we don't want to do, right? And so I see a lot of people, they schedule all their work. You need to just be scheduling good stuff too, right? Scheduling a
Mm-hmm.
movie, scheduling calling someone, reaching out, getting support, right? In all those ways, right? And so if you learn anything from anything that we've talked about, is that is honestly that take a this is a perfect opportunity to take a good look inside at ourselves and what are, what's going on
Mm-hmm.
internally, and kind of own that for ourselves, and really look at like our needs and our wants and pay attention to them, right? And if we're not getting those needs met, then where do we need to be more flexible, and how do we get help with that, right? And that's an easy way to start off, right? Even after just listening to this, just sit down and like sometimes even writing a list down,
Mm-hmm.
or like, you know putting it, in your phone, or do anything, right? Like sometimes we have to be flexible in our ways of exploring these things. Sometimes just sitting there and thinking about it doesn't work for people, right? We need to do
Mm-hmm.
something tactile, or have kind of an idea, and talk to someone about it too, right? And so, that's that. I think that's really, really huge. But realizing that, it's totally our mindset of how we deal with all this, especially around our COVID situations, no matter, how crazy they are. There's so much out of our control, but our one thing that we have is, we can choose to look at this, as a gift, or as a lesson, or we can choose to look at it as the worst thing in the world, and, like a horrible situation. Um, and and so we have that choice, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
instead of, focusing on what we don't have, and, wanting to control all those things, let's bring her back to basics, right? And bring it back to living in, moment by moment sometimes, and things are not going to be, perfect, or, okay. But, the more we fight that, the more I find that, for myself, that I struggle with accepting the things around me. And so, um, we have to keep this in your mind, is like, how am I living life on life's terms, right? That's a huge thing, because life is throwing a lot at us right now, and the more we kind of deny it, and, try to run from it, that's when we're, on that train, and we can't stop ourselves. And so sometimes just, you know looking at our mindset and looking at how we're dealing with all these situations, that's where the change can happen. We want to control everyone and make people do, the right things, but we can't, right? We just need to ground
Mm-hmm.
ourselves in this idea of like, I know who I am, I know what I want to be, and I can't change that just because the world is in crisis right now, right? And that's where I find the peace, and that's where I find serenity, even, you know, in a pandemic. So that's kind of, I think, sums up where what I've talked about today.
Thank you, Jake. In the event that any of our viewers would like to speak to you more about this, or if they've appreciated your energy and they want to speak to you about other things, is that okay with you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so anybody can certainly contact us, and I can forward correspondence to Jake. But also, Jake, are you willing to allow me to let your email go here so people can contact you directly?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, no
So so that's Jake at strengthcounseling.ca, and we'll put that in the main type up when we post this video. So Jake, again, much gratitude for you and your presence and everything you've said today. I've really resonated with it for sure, and for your donation of time. It's greatly appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure. It was awesome. So thank you
Okay,
for
my friend.
doing this.
Of course, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jake. Bye.